All right, guys, we are 5 weeks into the 2025 college football season, and we're starting to, key word, man, starting to get an idea of what these teams are about. Teams like Oregon, Ohio State, and Ole Miss have gotten some huge wins and are among some of the very best in the country. On the other hand, there are teams like Clemson that have been extremely disappointing and have had their seasons ruined before they were even really started. You've also got some teams like Vanderbilt that have come out of nowhere and are emerging as dark horses. And finally, you've got teams like Virginia Tech and Oklahoma State who have completely imploded and have already fired their head coaches.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40! I'm not a kid!
I'm gonna miss you, Mike Gundy, and so will all of college football. Anyways, with all that being said, there is one team that has captured the hearts of the nation. A team that plays with the kind of heart and swagger that even somebody who doesn't watch football would love. And that team, y'all, is none other than Georgia Tech. I feel like at this point the secret is out. You can't go on Facebook or Twitter or watch ESPN or Josh Pate or wherever you get your college football stuff from. You can't go on there without seeing or hearing someone talk about Georgia Tech and Haynes King and how tough they are and how gritty they are and how clutch they are and just all the great things that they're doing this season. I think right now Georgia Tech is America's football team, and I want to take a look at some of the reasons why. So first, we need to talk about how Georgia Tech got to the position that they're in now. Since the turn of the century, Georgia Tech has been a solid and competitive, but overall a somewhat mediocre football program. Under previous head coaches Chan Gailey and Paul Johnson, Tech consistently made bowl games and would every once in a while rattle off a surprising double-digit win season. It was something to appreciate, but overall it was nothing all that special. In 2018, Paul Johnson would retire, and Tech would be tasked with finding the next guy who would carry the mantle as the head ball coach. Let me tell you, the guy they landed on, Jeff Collins, turned out to be a disaster. Under his leadership, or lack thereof, Georgia Tech started his first 3 seasons with only 3 wins in each of them. If you watched any Tech football during this time period, you'll know this, but in case you didn't, I cannot emphasize enough just how bad these teams were. They couldn't run, they couldn't throw, couldn't play any defense. I mean, hell, they couldn't even kick extra points, man. They could not do anything right. They always looked so soft and unprepared. Basically, any negative quality you could associate with a football team, they were just that. And after a 1-3 start to the 2022 season, Jeff Collins was fired and the team had to name an interim coach, and that guy was none other than Brent Key. Immediately after being named the interim coach, Brent Key and Georgia Tech had to go on the road and play a very solid ranked Pitt football team. And previously under Jeff Collins, this is exactly the kind of game that Tech would lose by 3 scores and look terrible doing so. But not this time. In surprising fashion, Tech won the game. And I guess now is probably a good time for me to let y'all know that I'm a lifelong, die-hard fan of this football team, and I couldn't believe it. I had been so checked out of Tech football after what had happened up to that point. So believe me, I was shocked, man. I could not even believe that happened or even fathom the possibility. It was insane, dude. Anyways, after this game, Georgia Tech finished the 2022 season 4-4 under Coach Key and went 2-0 against ranked conference opponents, which, by the way, Tech had 0 wins against top 25 teams during Collins' tenure the entire time. And this was by no means, a good Tech roster. I mean, it was very bare bones. A lot of the best players, like Jahmyr Gibbs, for example, had transferred. And so to make something like this happen was a huge dub, man. Like a huge victory. And after all of this, Key got hired to be the head football coach permanently, and this is what has turned into potentially one of the greatest turn of events in the entire lifespan of the Georgia Tech football program. So over the next 2 seasons in 2023 and 2024 respectively, Tech was decent. They were inconsistent and kind of up and down, but they had some nice moments, and just a couple of them. They went on the road and beat an undefeated Miami. That was the game when Mario Cristobal forgot how to take a knee, and Tech got super lucky in the end, but I mean, you'll take it. And then they ended up beating Drake May in North Carolina at home, which was a huge win too. And to end the season, they even kind of hung around with Georgia. Georgia had control of the game most of the way, but you were happy to see a 500 team compete with a really good team. That Georgia team ended up going to the SEC championship and losing to Alabama. But in 2024, it was kind of the same thing. They started off the year with a big upset over Florida State, which turned out to not be an upset because FSU sucked. It was the worst collapse I've ever seen in college football. And they also ended up going on to beat Miami at home, who was ranked number 4. And this was the game where Haynes King basically had one arm and couldn't throw. And he was just having to basically play Wildcat quarterback. But everyone knows what happened at the end of the year. Tech went into Georgia and lost in 8 overtimes in a game where they clearly should have won based on how they played for the first 3.5 quarters or so. And it's one of those things where you don't want to take any moral victories. But this game was a real proof of concept for Brent Key and Georgia Tech. It was a game that basically said, hey, we're here, we can play with anybody, and we're going to do some things in the future. So moving into 2025, a lot due to that game I just talked about, Tech had some real expectations and momentum going in, but there were still a ton of questions about how this team would pan out. So now we're here. We're in 2025, and things could not have started better for Georgia Tech. They got a huge win on the road against Colorado where King went off. He had like 160 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. They got a win against Gardner-Webb, and then a huge win against Clemson where they sealed it with the Toro, the fire alarm field goal at the end of the game to win. They get a win against Temple, and then just this past Saturday, Tech beat Wake Forest in overtime in a game they really should have lost. A game where the referees made a very bad call at the end with a missed offsides that gave Tech the ball back. It was this whole thing. But at the end of the day, Tech is sitting here at 5-0 and everything in front of them. When you look at this schedule, tell me there's a game that Georgia Tech won't be favored in heading into Georgia, at least if things stay the way they are right now. And I'm not saying that Georgia Tech is going to just walk through the schedule and be 11-0 going into that game, but it's just to say it's possible. It could happen. None of these teams have really been all that consistent. They've shown some good things. They've shown some bad things. Personally, I'm probably the most worried about at Duke and at NC State. But other than that, we should be clearly favored in every game. And knowing Tech and having been a Tech fan for long enough, we're going to drop one of these games before Georgia. I'm just telling you that right now, we are going to. But the reason you need to tune in, the reason you need to pay attention to Georgia Tech football is that every single one of these games, damn near, is going to be exciting. These games will all have these ebbs and flows and back and forths that Georgia Tech seems to always kind of do. It's their thing at this point. They play in these close games no matter who it is, win or lose. They're always in these dogfights, and you should really be checking them out. If you need any other reason to watch this team play, watch them for Haynes King. This guy plays football like he is not concerned with his quality of life. I haven't seen a quarterback play this way since Tim Tebow. And basically, Georgia Tech's offense will go through these phases where they'll need a clutch drive, and every other play is quarterback power up the middle over and over again, and it keeps working, and it is just the craziest thing to watch. It's kind of like watching Navy or Army run the triple option, but they're running it out of the shotgun, and it's just ridiculous, man. Like, you have to check it out. It'll get you fired up. It's going to make you want to run through a brick wall. It's everything you could want out of watching college football. The rest of the team is good too. No one really shines as hard as King, but Brent Key has established this really tough culture that has kind of permeated into the entire roster. And you can see everyone just kind of feeds off of him and King, and they play really tough. They've got some pretty good players. They've got some pretty good depth, the best roster they've had in a while. And I think this team is really capable of a lot. And I think it's really cool to see Georgia Tech, who's typically such an underdog, finally get their time in the sun and finally get noticed by the greater landscape of college